Go ahead.
Alrighty. Hello, I am David, and this is what our movies need. I love movies. I mean, most of you probably know this. I love all kinds of movies. They're engaging, they're exciting, they're entertaining. But I haven't loved every single movie I've watched. For example, God's Not Dead. When I watched that, I found myself unengaged with the story or the characters. I mean, some parts did stick out to me because this is a Christian movie, but a certain show called The Chosen did more than just stick out to me. It impacted me, and I even cried in some scenes. Why is that? Why did one movie only have a slight impact on me, while one show had a massive impact? To answer that, we will look at the character arcs of Josh Whedon, the main character of God's Not Dead, and Simon, the main character of The Chosen. We'll also be looking at the multiple storylines surrounding theirs. First, Josh Whedon. Josh is a college student who wants to study law, but to do that, he has to pass this philosophy class taught by a professor who hates God. After refusing to sign a paper acknowledging that God is dead, he then has to make his argument on why God's not dead. After receiving a bunch of threats from the professor and after his girlfriend leaves him, he eventually sways the whole class into believing in God. So, what's wrong with this character? Well, think about it. He has goals, right? He wants to study law and be with his girlfriend. However, in the movie, both goals get threatened. The professor threatens to ruin any future he has with studying law, and his girlfriend just straight up leaves him. The problem is, he doesn't get affected by this whatsoever. He's kind of like too perfect. Because think about it. You gotta prove God's existence to a whole class that, doesn't really believe in God. Plus you got a professor that's a million times smarter than you. And, your own girlfriend doesn't even believe in you. That's gotta be a lot of pressure. And he overcomes all that very easily. Now, having said all that, let's now look at Simon from The Chosen. Simon is a fisherman with his brother Andrew. The problem is they are in a lot of debt. In fact, they're in so much debt that Simon decides to make a deal with the Romans to get out of debt. He basically says, if he turns in fishermen fishing on the Sabbath, then he'll get out of debt. However, Simon feels bad about that, so he double-crosses the Romans, and the Romans don't like that. So they say that he needs to pay his debt by the next day, or he'll be arrested. So Simon spends all night trying to catch enough fish to pay the debt, but ends up not catching any. So the next day, he gives up, heads back to shore, and who does he run into? Jesus, who makes enough fish appear to pay off the entire debt. So, why is Simon's character better? Think about this. He also has a goal, like Josh. He wants to get his family out of debt. However, what makes his character much more engaging is that he did everything he could to get that goal, even dealing with Romans, the same people oppressing his people. And he only achieved his goal after trying so hard and failing until he finally did what Jesus told him to do, which was to throw his net over the side of the boat. Alright, we've looked at the characters. Now let's look at the storylines surrounding God in God's Not Dead. God's Not Dead has about 6 different storylines. You've got Josh and the professor, but that professor has a girlfriend who is a Christian and in a bad relationship with the professor. That girlfriend then has a brother who is a businessman and the biggest jerk ever. And that jerk businessman then has a girlfriend who is a reporter lady who's an atheist and has cancer. And that college that Josh is talking at has a lunch lady who's a Christian trying to hide her faith from a Muslim family. And finally, we have the Reverend here, basically. So, what are the problems with all these storylines? Well, they may all be connected. I just said how they were connected, but they don't affect each other. They all kind of distract from Josh and the professor. The only person that actually affects each of these storylines is the Reverend dude, that guy right here. So he basically helps Josh, decide to prove God's existence to the school. He helps the professor's girlfriend see she's in a bad relationship, and he helps the lunch lady after her father discovers her and kicks her out of the house. And he doesn't even talk to these two. The poor lady actually gets saved by the newsboys, which is pretty crazy. But you see what I'm talking about? Each storyline just goes its own separate ways. Now, what the movie could have done was had the lunch lady actually be a student, hearing Josh's points and getting inspired by that. And then after she was kicked out, they could have then had Josh help her through that, which would have then inspired him to keep on going. And the reporter lady could have just been reporting on the college events, and we could have just done away with these three. But again, let's compare this to The Chosen. The Chosen has 4 main storylines. You got, of course, Simon and the fish, but you also have Matthew, who is the tax collector in Simon's town, Capernaum. You also have Nicodemus, who's like a very big Pharisee, coming to Capernaum for a couple of days to basically preach. And then you've got Mary Magdalene, who is possessed by 7 demons. So, how are these stories connected? Well, I will tell you. Basically, Nicodemus is told by the Romans to try to cast the demons out of Mary Magdalene since he's a holy man. He tries that, fails miserably. However, Mary gets healed by Jesus, who then calls her to follow him with James and Thaddeus. Nicodemus sees Mary healed and is like, who the heck did this? So he's trying to investigate Jesus. Meanwhile, Matthew, the Romans are telling him to basically spy on Simon to get him arrested pretty much. And because of that, this then leads Mary and Matthew to be there for the miracle of the fish, basically when Simon's fish are multiplied. Simon follows Jesus, Matthew's questioning reality, and Nicodemus is continuing his investigation. And eventually, all 4 of these stories come together at the miracle of the paralyzed man. Basically, Simon and Mary are watching because they're in the middle of it because they're following Jesus. Meanwhile, Matthew and Nicodemus are watching from the side pretty much. And this then leads to 2 things happening. One, this leads to the famous John 3 conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus. And this also leads Matthew to finally follow Jesus once he's called. Okay, that was a lot. And that's only season 1, honestly. But do you guys see the difference though? Each storyline in God's Not Dead distracted from the main point, but all 4 of these storylines all built toward one singular point, which was to show how Jesus got his first 8 disciples. The rest don't come until season 2. Alright, so, why is The Chosen more impactful than God's Not Dead? One of the answers is character. Josh was too perfect, had no flaws, and his goals weren't even really a priority to him. Simon, however, his goals were such a priority to him that he got super desperate and believed he had to fix everything himself. Because they both had goals, but see, the thing about Simon, a goal needs to be more than just simply what a character wants. It needs to be, as Andrew Stanton, that guy there who's the director of WALL-E and Finding Nemo, he basically said that a character needs a single drive, an itch that they just can't scratch. And a story needs a goal too. So, if you want to make movies, or write books, or comic books, remember, goals are the most important aspect of any story. The story has the goal to teach the main character a lesson, while the character will learn that lesson by trying and failing to go after their goal. And I believe that it'll be these stories and these characters that will bring people to God. People seeing them constantly try and fail until they finally meet Jesus. Yeah, that's what I believe will bring people to God. Thank you.